So in my quest to make new and tasty breads, I have taught myself how to make ciabatta. And ciabatta is a really delicious, crusty, light, fluffy white bread that takes very few ingredients, actually. You see everything in front of you that I'm going to need to make this bread dough. This bread dough is a little bit tricky because it's what we call a high hydration dough, which means it's got a lot of water to flour. So we're not going to knead this bread, and it's going to take probably 3 to 4 hours to make. So settle in because this process is a long one. So all that we need is 350 grams of flour, 280 grams of water, which is just a little bit over a cup of water. We will need a teaspoon of salt, and we will need a teaspoon of yeast. Also, this water has to be warm. So we're going to set aside our flour really fast and bring forward our water, our yeast, and our salt. We're going to add our yeast and salt to our warm water. So here's my teaspoon of yeast, and then my teaspoon of salt. And we're going to stir this around until it's dissolved. I use the pointy end of a wooden spoon and mix the two together. So you just pour in the yeast, salt, and water mixture. And then all that we need to do is use the pointy end of our spoon and stir this around until all of the flour is wet. And there we are. We have a prepared bread dough. Now, of course, this is not ready to bake yet. And all that we're going to do is cover this with a damp towel and place it in a warm spot to rise. We're only going to rise it for 30 minutes, and then when we come back, we're going to fold the dough over and then let it rise for another 30 minutes. Fold the dough over and let it rise for another 30 minutes, and then fold the dough over one more time. So in total, we are going to rise this bread 4 times, and then we're going to proof it once. That's why it takes so long. So let's cover this up, and I'll see you guys again in 30 minutes. And we're back 30 minutes later, and we are going to do our very first folding of the dough. Now what we're doing here is we're working with the gluten that is forming within our dough, but we're not going to knead this because it's just too sticky. So my hands are perfectly dry. If I touch this dough, it sticks to my hands. So what we need to make sure that we do first is get our hands wet, and this will mean that the dough won't stick as much to our hands. And we're not going to knead, we're going to fold. So I'm going to take the dough from the top corner here, get my fingers under it, pick it on up, and fold it over. Then I'm going to turn the bowl 90 degrees. And I'm going to pick the dough up, maybe give it a little shake, and fold it over. It's okay if they're sticking here. That's going to happen right now in these early stages. Turn the bowl 90 degrees, maybe get my fingers a little wet. Pick it up from the underside, fold it over, and this is my last side. Pick it up, nice and sticky, and fold it over. Now, when we do our other folds, we're only going to do that once in the circle. Right now, we're going to do it again. So this is a double fold around the first round. So we pick it up and fold it over. That's 1, 2, pick it up, give a little shake, fold it over, maybe get your hands wet again. Number 3, pick it up, give it a little shake, fold it over. This will be our last one. Pick it up, give it a little shake, and fold it over. Now we're going to let it sit again covered in a warm place for 30 minutes and come back and repeat the process. And we're back for a second fold. We just have to make sure that our hands are wet because this dough is still really, really wet and sticky. This time we just need to go once around the bowl, so 4 folds. Reaching in from the underside, stretch, 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 and pull. Give it a little jiggle. And pull, it's okay. If it doesn't come all the way up, you can even tuck it under like that. Get our hands wet, turn to the third side, and give a little tug. And then here's our last one. Give them a tug. And fold. So now we get to cover it one more time. We're going to let it sit for 34 minutes. We will fold it again. And then we'll be finished with all the folding. Alright, it's time for our third and final fold. So I'm just getting my fingers wet over here in my little water bowl. We only need to do this 4 times again. So we pick up from the underside, shake it a bit, and fold. You can see that the dough has risen. It's nice and fluffy now and soft. And we're almost ready to form it into our loaves and bake it. Oh, let me get him just a little bit from underneath. There we go. Last one. Give it a shake. Alright, so now we cover it one last time, let it sit for 30 more minutes, and it'll be time to form our loaves. It is time. We have folded our dough our 3 times, and now we're going to make our loaves and actually let them rise or proof one last time. So you'll see here that I have a very large amount of flour. Of course, I'm not going to use all of this, but I need to make sure that I put a ton of flour on my work surface because this dough is still really soft, and I'm not going to use water anymore in order to make sure that my dough doesn't stick. It's all going to be flour. So we're just going to make it snow. Now you can't tell this from where you're at, but I have only put the camera on 1/2 of my work surface. I am going to put flour on the other half because that is where I'm going to move the loaves to in order to let them sit and proof. Here's our beautiful ciabatta dough. I'm going to very carefully let gravity pull the dough out and drop onto my counter. Possible. Boom, look at that. So, to work with this, we have to put flour all around. So we're going to sprinkle flour on top of the dough, on the sides of the dough, just everywhere. Just everywhere. Just put it everywhere. And very gently, we're going to turn this into a rectangle. We're mostly going to do that by pulling up from underneath. And the reason we do it from underneath, instead of pressing a lot on top, we will do a little bit of pressing on top. But the reason we do that is because we don't want to deflate the dough as much as we possibly can. A little bit we will have to press outward, but we want to do that less. And we're just going to be very patient and stretch the dough out nice and gently. So once you think you have a pretty good sized rectangle, I don't have measurements on this, I haven't ever figured out how long the sides are. Once you've got a pretty good looking rectangle, you're going to take it from one of the long sides and you're going to roll it up. Kind of like a jelly roll. Or a cinnamon roll. Just roll it. There's going to be lots and lots of flour, so nothing should stick. You can even just very gently kind of move your fingers up and down to make it just a little bit longer. Make sure that things aren't sticking on the one side. And then you're going to take the seams and just press them together with your fingers, just to make sure that it doesn't have the chance to unroll. That's all we're doing. Just a nice light little press there. And what I like to do a little bit is try not to have quite such a thin end. I want it to be one thickness all the way down my dough log. Alright, so now I'm going to really quickly sprinkle flour on the other side of my board to prepare. So now I need a very awesome tool. You might have one of these at home. If you don't, then you can just use a sharp knife. This is a bench scraper. Some of you guys in other videos have seen me use this one. I got a new one, and it'll be handy to have two. You can also trim the edges of your ciabatta if you want a nice straight edge like you see in the grocery store. It's not necessary, but you can if you want to. Now we're going to divide this log into 3 equal pieces. And then we're going to very carefully move these pieces to the other half of our table. So you can use your bench scraper or very soft hands to lightly pick up the loaf and just move it over to here. Perfect. Now all that we're going to do is cover these in a layer of paper towels and let them proof for about 45 minutes, and then they'll be ready to put into the oven. The other thing that's important is that about 20 minutes before they're done, you'll want to preheat your oven to 230 degrees Celsius or 450 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll also want to put whatever you're going to bake the ciabatta on into the oven to preheat as well. You can use a baking stone if you have one. I don't, so I turn a baking tray upside down and put that into my oven. So we've come back after our proofing, and as we lift the veil, we see 3 lovely poofy ciabatta loaves right here. Behind me, I have my preheated cookie sheet that I'll have to take out of the oven in a second, and off to the side here, I've set up a piece of parchment paper. Now, I've done this on my little big pizza spatula here. It just helps me to move the loaves around, but you don't have to do this. You can also put this on like a cooling rack or something else flat, because what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully move these loaves onto the parchment paper. The parchment paper will go onto the preheated cookie sheet, and the cookie sheet will go into the oven. And then, when we put the loaves of bread in the oven, the last tool we will need is a spray bottle full of water, because we're actually going to spray water into the oven on top of the bread and then bake this bread at a high heat. And we're just going to loosen the loaf a little bit. It feels like these are pretty loose already, which is good. So we're going to scoop him up and set him gently down. I might even tuck it in just a little bit because I've got to have 3 loaves on this piece of parchment paper, and it's not very big. All I'm going to make sure of, see, this is even a little bit too close, so I'm just going to make absolutely sure that we've got some space. So now I need my preheated cookie sheet. Okay, so now this is a very hot cookie sheet. I cannot touch this. I'm kind of giving you the side view here so that you can see what I'm going to do. I have my loaves here, and I'm going to slide them very gently onto the back of my hot cookie sheet. Now I'm going to put these in the oven, spray them with water really fast, and then set the timer for 10 minutes. Kaboom! I'm just going to give you a quick view and then pull this off to the side. So I'm going to very carefully pick up my bread and just place it on the cooling rack. It doesn't need to stay on the parchment paper. But there we have 3 beautiful, poofy, thick rolls of ciabatta. So I realized a little bit through baking that I needed to make one last note in this video. You'll notice here 2 very different shapes of bread. This is a ciabatta that I baked a little bit earlier in the week, and this is the loaf that we just finished, or one of the loaves we just finished. One of them is a lot shorter, a lot wider, and fatter, a little bit deeper, and then this one is longer and skinnier, and it's going to produce a smaller slice. The only thing that I did differently between this one and this one is when I moved the loaves onto my parchment paper, I let gravity lengthen the loaf just a little bit, which is what gave it its traditional ciabatta shape. If you want bread that's a little bit thicker, a little bit better for slicing, then this is going to be just as delicious and will bake up just the same way. So, enjoy!